Howdy, all. We always like to start the show with something non-hockey related, music or whatever. And in Buffalo and a couple other cities where there's the NHL and the NFL, you see some players being released for um, varying reasons. I mean, in Buffalo, Mario Williams, who was signed, I think it was 3 years ago, to like a $100 million contract. The Bills waived him because they wanted to. I mean, he didn't fit in well with Rex Ryan's defense. Rush should know something about that. And
Of the 100 million, what did he collect?
it was a little bit front loaded. I think he collected like probably 65 million of the nine. It was 96 million, so he probably collected 2/3.
Okay.
They opened up like $13 million in cap space with the waiving of him. And I saw this morning Roddy White from Atlanta was let go, which I was surprised at. I mean,
I'm surprised at that one. I was at the NFL rookie photo shoot in his rookie year and interviewed him, and I liked him. I liked what I saw on the field. I liked what I saw off the field, and he's had a real nice career, 11 years already. Somebody's going to pick him up.
Probably. Oh, I would bet anything that he would be picked up. But the reason I bring this up is because and believe me, I'm not looking forward to the day when we're going to be talking about the new CBA. I believe it's another 6 years before we even have to worry about that. I think it's 2022. The summer.
I know a week ago, somebody had a question. They asked me, do I think Donald Fear will still be around for that? After attending yesterday's World Cup phone call, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so
yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a physically strenuous job. It's mostly your mind. So
he's very passionate and very invested in what he's doing, and he's not leaving anytime soon. I can tell you that.
Right. So, but the thing is that and I'll use Bill Daley's phrase, the hill that some people are looking to die on for the next CBA is guaranteed contracts. And can you imagine what it would be like if we had this kind of day in the summer, not only free agent day on July 1st or the draft day and all the trades that happen, but also before the draft, teams cutting players and just bailing out of the contracts.
Yeah, it's not going to happen because I think I can't tell you why it's happened in the NFL other than their PA was the weakest in all of sports, and they never, even when they had the replacement players, it was pretty clear at that point, at least to me, and I was, probably, 15 at the time, something like that.
Right.
It was pretty clear to me at the time when they went with replacement players that the NFL players had no leverage whatsoever. And all these years later, they still have no leverage. It's the only sport that doesn't have some sort of guaranteed contract. And so I don't think we're going to be slipping back and having the other sports losing that.
Right.
But we do see players get traded and or exiled for cap space. That does happen now.
I mean, you do see that the system is starting to morph closer to what the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no Larry Bird exemption in the NHL, but the trading of contracts. The last summer when Mark Savard was moved, Chris Pronger was moved. Those were the first of the moves where, in the Nathan Horton trade, those were the first moves where players' contracts are being traded, where the player isn't actually part of the mix. Because Pronger is done for his career, so is Savard. Nathan Horton is probably never playing again with the degenerative back problem that he has. And that whole insurance thing made that deal possible. But now you see players being moved strictly for cap reasons, and in those two deals, Savard and Pronger, it was the fact that the deals were front-loaded, the money being paid out was literally nothing, and the cap hit was still $4 million or over $4 million. So it was a benefit to those budget teams. So I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see a lot more.
Well, I remember writing an article when the first new cap hit, this cap, and I knew that there would be NBA-style trades, and we're still waiting for like a sign and trade, but that's going to come. We're getting very close to that now, and so it is mirroring it. The only difference is I think the NBA, the NHL has better balance than the NBA does.
Right.
Now, that's not to say the NHL doesn't have dynasties, because they're starting to have what I'll call that quote-unquote dynasty, because I like their consecutive wins to really call it a dynasty. But there are a couple of teams that are dominating now where that generally has happened in the NBA. But I think there's, with the exception of this year, there's been more teams in it every year. This year is one year that I feel like there's less teams in it than the last few years. But for the most part, this cap is working. The problem is every cap can be circumvented. It's just the way it is.
Right, and we may not. And I don't think it's circumvention, but we may have seen a new evolution in this with what's going on in Toronto, where you have players, and you've already had one this year with Stefan Robidas, who makes $3 million, who's not placed on injured reserve, who's not, or he's placed on injured reserve, but he's getting paid his full salary, and he's placed on there for the entire year. And really, from every indication, he was told at the end of training camp, "You're not making the team. Have a nice day. I'm sure you'll enjoy your paycheck, but you're not going to play. And I don't think you want to go down to the minors." Now, there's no record of that, but he just disappeared. He played almost 20 minutes a night, or almost 20 minutes the last game in the preseason, and then was never seen from again. And there's speculation. I know Steve Simmons in the Toronto Sun last weekend said that might be what they do with Joffrey Lupul. If they can't find a suitor for him, to trade him someplace with his contract and his history of injuries, that may be a problem. They may just pay him the last 2 years. And
see, this is where the cap is a double-edged sword, because you get the cap that sort of helps GMs, and it does help players, because it definitely helps players make more money, because now players are sort of getting slotted in more than they used to. And now once the market gets set, they could definitely count on that price, where before, when it was just free market, you were all over the board with pricing. Now pricing is a little more structured, but players now, younger players, are getting money sooner. And that's definite. That's happening now more than ever. But the downside of it is the older players are getting tossed aside sooner than ever before, too.
Yeah, and see, the thing is that there's going to be an evolution in this as well with the young players being signed, because there's an inherent risk right now with teams in terms of evaluating players after 3 years, after the 3 years of their entry-level deal. And I'll take, for example, the Oscar Klefbom deal in Edmonton. He had only played, I think it was 70 NHL games before they signed him to a 6-year extension at over $4 million.
Which was part of my problem with it.
Right. To me, it's like, how can you really accurately evaluate how good he's going to be based on 70 games? Now, what I think a lot of managers are doing here is they're putting their finger up to the wind, and they're saying, okay, and they're using their judgment as hockey guys.
They're going with cost certainty over evaluation, almost, right, in that kind of case.
They're mixing cost certainty with their evaluation process, that this guy is going to be good. And with some teams like Dallas with John Klingberg, they hit a home run because they knew he was going to be good. They knew he was good, and they got him locked up to the long-term deal. And 3 or 4 years down the line, that deal is going to be a steal. But you don't know about a guy like Klefbom. Klefbom could be a bust, and now you're locked up with him for another 4 years at $4 million. So,
right,
I think it puts a lot of pressure on teams to evaluate players quicker, and and players don't want to take those bridge deals. They want the long-term security right away.
They do. The biggest thing now is, as we've seen, besides having to be able to draft well, is to have your player development be top-notch. And the cap doesn't, you can't worry. You don't have to worry about the cap when it comes to scouts and player development people. And so organizations can load up on those guys, and they should. And they really, to me, if I were a GM of an organization, especially a new one, I would be looking at the player development model quicker than I'd be looking at how we're doing in the draft, because I think that's more controllable. I think you could do better in the draft much quicker than you can fix a broken player development model. That takes a little more doing, and that's part of the problem, I think, in Edmonton, and why it's taking so long. And so until you really take care of that portion of it, the other part's not going to matter as much because you could draft guys all you want, but unless that player development model is good and you've got your AHL team playing the same system as your NHL team and they're sort of interchangeable, because we see that the good teams are. You see when someone comes up from Rockford, they go right into the Blackhawks and it's fine. You see that the same thing with the Red Wings. You see it with the Kings. You see that with like 3 or 4 or 5 teams. More teams have to do that. And if you do that, then you fixed your player development. Then you could worry about your drafting on aspect of it.
And Toronto, and just the last thing on this, and I've of course always referenced Toronto because I'm so well aware of the organization. Yep. That's the one dramatic change that's happened over the last 12 months, last 18 months since Brendan Shanahan took over. They bring in Mark Hunter, they have Lou Lamoriello, they bring in Mike Babcock. The AHL team, the Marlies, are playing the same systems, the same techniques as the Leafs, and when they bring up 5 guys or the 4 guys like Shoshnikov, Hyman, Nylander, and Kapanen, they fit in right away. They know what they're doing. Now, obviously, the level of play in the NHL is a lot higher, and they have to be a lot quicker, but you can see them fitting in a lot better than I've seen young guys in the past who make mistakes as they first come in. So, and
we'll see. Look, I don't get to see Edmonton enough, right? But every year for the last 3 years that Edmonton has come in, I always watch them intently. And I've walked away the last 3 years, not counting tonight because they're playing in Philly tonight, that there's something wrong with the way this team is run, with the lines, with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't fully ironed out. Now, with McLellan there, I may walk away saying, hey, you know what? They are a lot better. They're just the other things need tweaking now. So we'll see.
Yep. Well, let's start the show here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, March 3rd, 2016.
All right, I didn't want to keep you in suspense. I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockeybuzzcast here on Hockeybuzz.com. Eklund will be back tomorrow. News of the day, big news of the day. Although I'm still scratching my head and losing hair about that. Carey Price comes out in a press conference, makes some comments to the media after a skate, and says, his goal is to get back in the game, get back before the end of the regular season. He was selected to Team Canada for the World Cup of Hockey. We'll discuss that in a minute.
Yep.
But Russ, I'm a little puzzled because the Canadians are out of it, clearly out of it. They're
not mathematically, so they're living in that bubble right now.
Well, I mean, okay, we'll live in the world of mathematics and then we'll live in the world of realism. They're out of it. But they have a chance, if he comes back and gets re-injured, of screwing up the beginning of next season. I mean, I understand, you've been out since November and you want to get back playing, and if you feel 100% and everything is fine, great. But this has been such a long and lingering issue. I'm just puzzled that they would not shut him down and they would let him come back.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. I'm going to just guess that the way the injury is that the doctors probably told him it couldn't get any worse and it might get better. And I guess by having him come back and seeing if he could actually play is a way of gauging whether he would need additional surgery or not. And so I think that's what they're shooting for, because I was on the World Cup conference call yesterday and Doug Armstrong was basically saying Carey Price is on the list, but we don't know what's going to go on. And he wasn't going to speculate, and I don't blame him. And he spoke to Price and Bergevin, and so he made sure everybody was in place before he even named Price. And so I think that's the first goal, is to see if Price can not have to have surgery, because he's had multiple surgeries, right?
He's had one surgery.
One, okay. So this could be his second. So they're trying to avoid that, which I get. And so that's where I think they're at right now. I think in a couple of weeks, everybody will know a little bit more. Now, Armstrong doesn't really have to worry about Carey Price until middle of September.
Right.
So at that point, even after a surgery, he might be totally healed. As far as for this season, it's not going to help the Montreal Canadiens. We know that.
Right. I mean, I keep making comparisons between this and the Masahiro Tanaka thing with the Yankees, where they brought him back at the end of the season when he had the arm problem. They weren't in the playoffs, but they pitched him anyway, and then he went through the whole rehab during the off season, and he pitched through the entire year. And then this year he had surgery, so it wasn't as serious as a surgery as they thought it was going to be. I think he was going to be having Tommy John surgery, but he lasted through the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
Where if he would have had Tommy John, he would have missed the entire year. So,
right.
I mean, I get that. It's sort of weighing the pluses and the minuses here, but I don't see a positive in bringing him back and risking the potential injury unless, like you said, they think he can't do any more damage to it, or we have to test it out and see whether he can play on this. And if he can't, then let's have the surgery now. But then
I think that's where they're at. I really do think that's where they're at. And it's a tough spot to be at. My contention was 2 months ago, they pretty much could tell they might be in this spot and didn't shore up the position anymore, and they lost their playoff positioning. Mm-hmm. Now, is that being overly critical? I don't know. I think that's really what happened here with this season, because I think if they'd have brought somebody else in, no slight to Mike Condon, I think Mike Condon's played well. He's got 16 wins. But at the end of the day, if they'd have brought somebody else in, they might have been able to save their season. They didn't do it because I guess they were hopeful Price would come back. He didn't come back, and now the season's over. So that's 2 seasons now that I could tell you that injuries to Carey Price have directly affected them.
Which to me makes me believe, and I'm fairly certain that you'll agree, that Bergevin this offseason, either by free agency or by trade, will get himself a number 2 that is capable of being a number 1. He's not going to get caught in this position again. Scrivens is a free agent. He leaves.
Yeah.
Maybe Condon's the backup. You can't depend on Zach Bucali being 20 years old to step in.
Right.
If Price is not right, then maybe they sign Cam Ward for a year, or they're going
to do something. He's not going to be in this position again.
Yeah, they trade for Jonathan Bernier or something. Yeah. They have to have a number 1 in waiting in case Carey Price can't play.
Now, I will say that if Price comes back and he just says he can't go or only plays 1 game and then does play in the World Cup, Canadians fans are going to be a little uneasy about that. But, again, there's nothing you can do about it. This is a tournament that players want to play in, and they're just going to have to deal with that.
No, let's go over some of these teams. I know that we did some of that yesterday. We were speculating about the 3 teams that hadn't been announced when we were doing the webcast at 3 o'clock.
Let's start with Team USA.
Yeah, okay. Team USA. I'll read off the list here. 3 goaltenders, and we got them all right: Schneider, Quick, and Ben Bishop. Yeah. 4 defensemen: Suter, McDonough, Carlson. We all got. Dustin Byfuglien was the one that, and I mentioned his name, but I think I mentioned him more as one of the guys that would be one of the additional 7, but they selected him as one of the original 4. Forwards: Blake Wheeler, Derek Stepan, Joe Pavelski. We forgot. Duh.
We did.
Zach Parise, Max Pacioretty. Canadians fans will say that's because I cover the Leafs that I subconsciously did not
bring up Pacioretty's name. We just all of us overruled it.
Yeah.
But we did bring up his name.
Right. T.J. Oshie, Ryan Kessler, Patrick Kane, and the surprising one in terms of being on the list was Justin Abdelkader. Not to say that I didn't think he could make it as one of the additionals. But
even Kessler, who's not having a great year, is getting there half on reputation now.
Right. But let's go through this. The surprising ones that were omitted, especially based on what they did 2 years ago at the Olympics, was Phil Kessel and James Van Riemsdyk. Now, I know Van Riemsdyk is hurt.
Justin Falk was a bigger deletion than Van Riemsdyk, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, Justin Falk I was genuinely shocked at because he's had a pretty good year. But
here's the thing. All right, so Dean Lombardi's on the call, and the first thing he did was talk about Abdelkader, and the thing that we have to sort of get used to here is they are really drafting for a team. They are not going to go with all best players. Even though sometimes we think that's the best way to do it, they're not doing it. Right. So they like the fact that Abdelkader is hard to play against. They like the fact that he's having a good year. They like him. So that's why he's on there. He's not necessarily on there because he's one of the 10 best U.S. players. He's on there because he's fitting a role that they feel is going to work really well for him. And so it's hard to argue that now. You can't, right? The coach is John Tortorella, which is funny because he's really had really gone a full 180 if you think about it as to where he was before to now he's going to be representing the U.S. And so one quote that basically was said was, hey, I know what John's MO is. And I'm thinking, this is kind of interesting that Lombardi's already sort of diffusing that, but also saying that he was going to work with the roster he had. And when Byfuglien came up, the interesting thing about that was the dual position part of his resume was mentioned by Lombardi, and I'm thinking, so just like Stu Bickle with the Rangers, and I'm not saying Byfuglien's Stu Bickle, obviously he's a lot better, but now I'm sort of imagining that Falk will make the team and that Byfuglien's going to be like a swing guy. And so he might be playing some forward in this series, and that is definite John Tortorella.
Which would not make Byfuglien happy because he likes playing defense.
Right, but again, he's going to do whatever Tortorella is going to tell him to do, or at least at the beginning, right? And so we'll see how that works out, but I'm sure he'll play defense to start, but I would almost guarantee we're going to see him at forward in that series. So that was kind of interesting. The other thing was Lombardi at one point, a direct quote is I have an idea what John is thinking, but I don't think Alexander the Great gave away anything at Issus. And I had to look that up because I'm not an expert on Alexander the Great. And so that battle happened in 333 BC.
Yeah, I mean, I almost have a master's in history, and I had to look that up. And I know that Alexander the Great was a master of tactics, but I mean, talk about obscure references. I mean,
but it's fantastic though if you think about it because it shows the intelligence of Lombardi. We all have to look it up. And, the only thing I can come back with in the article that was witty was, they weren't playing hockey back then. But it's funny how the cerebral part of it is really important right now in building these rosters. And he did say one other thing, and I feel like, look, Lombardi's obviously one of the top guys out there. So when he talks, I listen. And one of the other things that he said was, it's imperative that we get this right and leave no stone unturned. I think we have to do more leading up to this next point than we've done up to now. And I think he's right because when you pick that initial roster, it's hard, but a lot of the guys, that they're going to make it. If we could figure it out, they could figure it out, right? Yeah. But now when you only have a few to add, it does get a lot harder.
Funny, I can't imagine John Tortorella being played by Colin Farrell. But that being said, I mean, again, I always look at the omissions. Falk was surprising. Kessel, I know
Falk is still in the mix. He did say.
Well, here's the question: Do you think Kessel and Van Riemsdyk are?
I think Kessel is. I didn't get a feeling Van Riemsdyk is. Now, it doesn't mean if he comes back and scores, 12 goals at the end of the season, he probably will be
shut down for the season. He's done.
Yeah, so I don't think he is.
And that's surprising. I mean, he was leading the Leafs in scoring. Not to say that that's a great accomplishment because they haven't been scoring, but he was playing effectively for Mike Babcock. I think there's still. I mean, maybe it was a question of he's injured right now, so we don't have to choose him. We can choose him in June 1st is when the rosters are going to.
And there could be injuries, and then Van Riemsdyk finds his way on. I mean, he's going to be a guy that they're tracking, but him being injured doesn't help his case. That is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, right now, looking at this roster, I see, in terms of pure goal scorers, I see two, Kane and Pacioretty. Not to say that Parise can't score goals or Pavelski can't score goals, but I'm talking about just pure offensive.
And I'm going to tell you what the listeners out there and the people watching are going to think right now because this pops in my head too. This has been a problem that's been a problem with Team USA teams for the last 4 or 5 years, is that we kind of look at them and say, there's not enough guys that could just simply put the puck in the net.
Right.
And this is
and that's why Kessel, even though he's got 17 goals right now with Pittsburgh, based on arguably, other than Kane, the two most effective offensive weapons in Sochi were Kessel and Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah, it's been a systemic problem, but I can't get crazy right now because there's time to add those goal scorers,
Sure.
and a guy like Kessel could be added, and a few others. The interesting thing is, though, as you see as we go on the rosters, down the rosters, you have to be a pretty complete player to make these teams.
Yeah.
If you're a one-way player, and we're going to talk about some that are going to be on the edge, that's why they're not selected first, because they're looking for guys to play certain roles. And so when we get to Team Canada, I can explain more.
Well, and this is going along with what Team USA has done over the last few years. I mean, they did it in the World Junior. They did it in the 2010 Olympics. They did it in the 2014 Olympics. They always want guys who can play the bottom six roles. And I mean, Kessler can be the checking line center. Abdelkader can be the checking line because he's fast and he's big. That to me, that means that you can't omit the possibility of a guy like Dustin Brown. Although I think, the thing is, his speed has gone down, and I think that's going to eliminate him.
The problem is also at the end of games, third period, you're down by a goal.
Yeah.
Those bottom six types don't help you come back and win.
Right.
They don't, and that's what we've seen with some of these Team USA teams. So we'll have to see. The ice. Tom Rennie, and let's flip to Team Canada. He talked about it being 200 by 85. It's like hockey on steroids. And so it was a funny quote, but it's interesting because it gives you a mindset. The mindset is they're going to expect a lot of rough and tumble play in this series because it's going to be tight quarters. It's not the big international ice. And so based on that, it's not going to be like the World Championships where it's mainly just pretty open hockey and not much checking this is going to be like very different than Olympic and World Cup and World Championship hockey.
I mean, you're voicing one. I was listening to something and somebody was voicing a concern about the World Cup and how invested people will be in it, and the fact that this is like an all-star game type of.
Here's the thing. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you how it's not an all-star game.
Okay.
The minute Radko Gudas is on the ice, it's no longer an all-star game.
Right, but you know what I'm saying. Like I saw some of the interviews with some of the Team Canada members in between intermissions on the Leaf broadcast last night. And they're like, okay, they were enthused, but it didn't seem like, oh boy, I'm so anxious to go to. It's like, okay, it's something where these players are going to come into a Team Canada training camp earlier than normal instead of going to their training camp. I mean, you always want to represent your country, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to wait until we actually see the play on the ice. If it's as emotional and as invested as the Olympics, then okay. Then I think we have an event that people will be interested in and buy in. If it's not, if it's less, and players are like, okay, let's just get through this without getting hurt, then I think this is, then it's clearly, I mean, I heard people say it's clearly a money-making scheme and for the PA and for the NHL, and nobody's invested in this.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. And here, again, I go back to what Matt Duchene told me in December, who he was the first player that really sort of had this fiery attitude about it. And he basically said from the second that it was a possibility, it was a goal of mine to make the team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Team Canada.
But, so to me, and he hasn't made the team yet, right? So,
no.
But if there's a burning like that in Matt Duchene, there is in other players, trust me.
Right. Team Canada, 16 players, obviously. They chose 3 goaltenders, Price, Holtby, and Corey Crawford. Now, I heard yesterday that if Carey Price is unable to go, that the number 4 is Luongo.
They didn't say that, but it's probable. Yeah. But I will say this. Everything is gauged on Carey Price for this team. Everything. I'll give you a quote from Doug Armstrong that pretty much tells you besides, as we said, that they sat down and talked to Bergevin and they all got together, basically he said that these are the best 3 goalies for us. Carey's resume speaks for itself.
Right.
So he basically separated Price from the other 2 goalies, although he was very complimentary and said, hey, Crawford's got 2 Stanley Cups and everything else. But right now, you could tell that team is built around Carey Price.
Now, here's the question, and we'll get to the rest of the team in a second. But let's assume Carey Price is not available.
Okay.
And it is Luongo.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the starter? To me, it's Holtby. But I
think it's going to be the hot hand.
Okay, so Babcock is gonna evaluate in training camp, is what you're saying.
Yes.
See, I mean, okay, you've got Luongo, who won the gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
But it was now 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Crawford, who's won 2 Stanley Cups, and you got Holtby, who at that point will know if he's won a Stanley Cup or not with the Caps, but he's having a Price-like year this year.
Yeah.
But it would be his first international, I believe, his first international comp. I'm not including World Championships or anything like that.
Right. No, I think it is of this kind of caliber, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, to me, maybe they would go with Luongo. Luongo would be in sort of the Cujo place right here. Like, he gets the first couple starts, and if he continues to play well, great. And if he doesn't, then a Crawford or a Holtby is waiting in the wings.
Maybe. I think it's going to be the hot hand. But here's the thing. When you look at this team, Armstrong basically called guys that were on the Olympic team that didn't make this team at the start, just to kind of say, hey, sorry, you're not on it yet. We'll see.
Right.
So guys like Bouwmeester were mentioned because he's an omission right now. And so you kind of have, to me at least, this is what I took from the call. If you were on the gold medal winning Olympic team, you've got a better chance than somebody who wasn't, as far as being one of the guys added late.
Well, okay, here's the 4 defensemen, and three you would basically say in your sleep. The 4th one was on the Olympic team, but to me it's like 3 up here and 1 down here. Not to say he's not a good defenseman, but the selections were Doughty, Keith, Shea Weber, and Marc-Edouard Vlasic. And I'm like, okay, 3 in this territory, and Vlasic, who's a very good defenseman, down here.
I'll tell you what the feeling is about Vlasic that I think, like, clearly you and Eck don't believe in, and I think other people are in your same, feel the same way. GMs look at him as like the preeminent shutdown guy in hockey. They do. Now, he is a pretty good puck mover, and he does still have a pretty good shot, even though those are things that are not expected out of the guy. He's very steady. He does play a lot of minutes, and he does have a lot of, experience at this point. So I think it's easy to find a guy that's better than Vlasic, but he's also a guy that fits in. And the one thing that Armstrong talked about was, again, and people who were asking him questions, having that righty, that lefty, having guys who play the right side, the left side. And these are all things, you're building a team from scratch, right? So, again, that's why I think a guy like Bouwmeester has an inside track here if he does halfway well in the playoffs, because he could play anywhere, any pairing, any side.
Well, the thing that was surprising is that Bouwmeester's defense partner wasn't one of the 4. I thought Pietrangelo has been hurt, and maybe that's the consideration. They're waiting for him to come back.
I think that's the consideration.
Right. So, but I think that when we were talking yesterday, you mentioned, and this is the thing. I realized again that this guy was on the 2014 team, but Dan Hamhuis, really? I mean,
again, sometimes, and again, this is something that will anger people that are listening, and I get it. Hamhuis was mentioned on the call, not that he's going to have a chance to make it or anything, but just that, like you said, he was there before. But if you think about Hamhuis, he's a guy that, would he fit in a bottom pairing very well? Yes, he would. So that's sometimes when you're building a team, do you want a guy that is used to being a top pairing guy playing the third pairing, or do you want a guy that's closer to playing the third pairing, playing the third pairing? I mean, I think, unfortunately, that's the thought process.
I think Bouwmeester and Pietrangelo, depending on his health, will be They'll probably go with 8 defensemen. They usually do. They usually
Yeah.
pick 8. What I'm sure, and we called this yesterday. PK Subban was not part of the top 4 of the.
Anybody who was shocked about that should go back and learn history, because you could see it coming.
Yeah. I mean, okay, has he gotten better over the last couple of years with his two-way play? Yes, he's more he doesn't take as many risks, but he still does take risks.
Yeah.
And I think Babcock and Hockey Canada want dependable two-way guys. They want the upside, they want the offensive ability, they want the ability to jump into the rush like a Keith or a Doughty, who's a very creative defenseman. They want that, but they also want steady guys, and that's the only reason I think you end up going with a Vlasic as one of those choices, because, like you said, he's a steady guy. But Subban is a wild card.
Right, and the thing is, as we talk about, like, again, when we get to like Team North America, there are especially defensemen that are one-way guys right now. GMs don't want any part of those guys in this kind of tournament,
right?
Because they know how tightly contested it's going to be, and they know that a bad play, a bad goal could affect their whole tournament.
Yeah.
And so they are looking for safe guys. Now, look, you look at Bouwmeester. Is he having the best year of his career? No. But I just looked up, he's getting 30 to 32 shifts every game.
Yeah.
And just as you said, that's what Babcock's sort of looking for, is he wants, again, look, when you're coaching a team like this, you want some of it to sort of be like almost automated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you tap the guy, he goes in, you don't have to worry about that guy. That makes your job a lot easier. So there's going to be a bit of that, whether people like it or not.
In 2010, one of the last cuts, or one of the last defensemen that got eliminated from consideration was Stefan Robidas, because Stefan Robidas at that point was still quite mobile and a very steady, solid veteran defenseman. But he's not spectacular. He's not going to go end to end like Bobby Orr. They don't need that. They have enough of that. They have Keith and Doughty. They have Weber's big shot from the point. They really, basically the second half of their defense, they just want steady guys. Now, forwards, 9 forwards, and arguably 8 of them are centers. Or have played center the majority of their career. Jamie Benn is, to me, the only pure winger of the 9. Patrice Bergeron, Jeff Carter, Sidney Crosby, Ryan Getzlaf, Tyler Seguin, Steven Stamkos, John Tavares, and Jonathan Toews. Now, we know, like, from the Olympic experience that Toews played the wing in 2010, but he'll play center. Tavares played the wing in 2014. Stamkos will probably move to the wing. So they have guys who can play different positions. But it's 8 centers of the 9 players.
I think, again, it doesn't hurt you in the sense that if some of them are really good at faceoffs, it gives you better options when a winger has to take a faceoff and he's really a center, right? I think that does help you. Here's the thing, though, like with Jeff Carter. So when his name was brought up, Armstrong basically just said, yeah, well, Jeff Carter, it doesn't matter about analytics. It's Jeff Carter. He'll be out there. He'll score goals. And so there's a little bit of that blind faith mentality that used to exist with Brian Burke and Chris Drury that exists now with Team Canada and a guy like Jeff Carter, because there'll be people that'll say, hey, this guy's better than Jeff Carter, or that one's better. And I could be inclined to agree with them too. But at the end of the day, Jeff Carter's produced for Team Canada. He's the one who's going to get the nod.
Right. Now, in 2014, they moved past the Marlowe, Thornton, Heatley generation.
Yes.
Question is now, this one coming up, are they moving past the Corey Perry, Rick Nash generation?
Well, Nash's name never even came up, and I think rightly so. He would really have to go on a tear like he did last year at the beginning of the season, but more so now at the end of the season when he finally hits the ice. He's 10 to 12 days away at the very best, and he hasn't been skating yet. Right. So who knows what he'll produce, and he's never been a great playoff producer. So if he doesn't produce well in the playoffs, this could totally zero him out. Now, Ranger fans might be happy because if they remember, last time he was on the fence for making Team Canada, he went on a little bit of a roll. Right. Not in the playoffs, but in the regular season until he got named to the team. So we'll see. We'll see if it does affect players. It does, and sometimes it does light a fire under them. But he's in danger of not making it. Corey Perry, I don't think is in danger of not making it. They brought his name up, and Armstrong was hugely complimentary about him. And I think it's just like telling Corey Perry, just let me see a little more, and you'll be on the team. I really think he's going to make it.
Who are the other names that were brought up that didn't make the team? Duchesne obviously is a guy.
I don't know if Duchesne's name was brought up for the time I was on there, though, to be honest. But I know for a fact that they like Duchesne, and it's just a matter of right now it's a numbers game. They know Duchesne will play the wing. They know the speed he's got. He's got 26 goals. He's going to probably end up this year with a career high in goals. So I think it's going to be really hard to keep him off the team. Mm-hmm. So I think you will look at him. But Perry was the big name that was brought up for sure. But like I said, for the time I was on there, and I wasn't on the entire time, Nash was not even mentioned at that point.
I mean, there's going to be 7 players added on June 1st. More than likely, it's either going to be 3 forwards and 4 defensemen, or vice versa, 4 forwards and 3 defensemen. I would think Perry. I would think Brad Marchand is going to be one of those guys. But
I think Marchand will be looked at, but I don't know if they're thinking about him the same way we're thinking about him.
And I think the only one that we didn't talk about was Team North America, right?
Yeah. So.
Okay, I'll go through the list here, and I think we hit the goaltenders perfectly. John Gibson, Anaheim, Connor Hellebuyck, Manitoba Moose / Winnipeg Jets, and Matt Murray, Pittsburgh. 4 defensemen: Aaron Ekblad, Seth Jones, Morgan Riley. We all hit. We mentioned Ryan Murray, but I don't think we said he was going to be in the top 4.
We did mention Murray. We didn't think he'd be in the top 4. We mentioned Gostisbehere. We thought he might be in the top 4.
Right. Now maybe they want to see more of Gostisbehere, but yeah, I think he's got a good chance because he's such a wild card. He's such a good skater.
But his defense really has to get better because, again, that is what's going to hold him back. Because when you're on the call and you know who the coach is and you start listening to – well, actually, this coach is different, Gerard Gallant, but Gallant is running a pretty good defensive team himself right now. It's going to be hard to take players that are one-way guys. Now, this call was interesting because Stan Bowman has his own confidence, which rightly so. I mean, there's very few that are better than him in the game, but he's the associate GM. Chiarelli is actually the GM, and Chiarelli, actually, he's still a pretty shrewd talent evaluator, and they said this team is going to push the play and move the puck, and without saying it, he's basically saying, veterans, if you're playing against this team, we're going to try and tire you out. Because, and that's a good strategy, I think.
Well, I'd say they have enough speed and enough offense, at least with the 9 forwards. Sean Couturier, Philadelphia Flyers, Jack Eichel, Johnny Gaudreau, Dylan Larkin, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Sean Monahan, Brandon Saad. The surprising one to me was JT Miller. Not to say that he doesn't deserve to be on there, but it was like, okay, I don't think his name was even brought up when we were
I was thinking about it, but I didn't bring it up because we brought up so many names. He is having a career year. It is all hitting well for him right now. And so I think that's the reason because, again, he does play physical. He's not coughing the puck up like he used to in the neutral zone. And so I think those are things that are keeping him in it right now. And so I think he deserves it. I do. Like I said, Gostisbehere, his name didn't come up for the time I was on there, but I could tell that the way the philosophy was going, that it's going to be hard for him to make that team. Not impossible, but it's going to be hard because Trouba's not on there yet. That's a name that certainly you would look at. And there's 3 or 4 other names. And so he's going to be a part of like 4 names that he's going to have to battle through to make that team. That's where it's not a gimme anymore. If he was named initially, that would be one thing. But once you're not named initially, then it gets harder because the one thing the U.S. produces are defensemen. And the North American teams, there's a lot of defensemen, an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I think 4 years from now, I mean, obviously these goaltenders won't be part of the under 24 and under team 4 years from now, but 4 years from now, I mean, I think Gibson could be in the mix for Team USA. Murray could be in the mix. Hollebuck could be in the mix for Team USA. I mean, it's very possible, but I still think that that's the weak spot of this team. It's like, I mean, there's not a lot of NHL experience. We know that Hollebuck played well at the World Championships last year, but I think this roster, I mean, just the first 16, minus the goaltenders, could give Team Canada or Team USA a run for their money, but the goaltending might be the great equalizer.
Yeah, it may be. Here's the other names I came up with, too, for that Gostisbehere will be sort of duking it out with. Colton Parayko,
Yeah.
Truba I mentioned, and Noah Hannafin.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's tough. It's good choices for them. It's good choices for Team North America, though, because they really, to me, they're holding a lot of cards here in this tournament. They look good. They've got a good roster. I like the management team. I do. I think Chiarelli is good. You know, I like the fact that he said that they're going to push the pace and back off the defense. The other thing that he said that was kind of interesting, and I guess he wanted to sort of push the point, is he said, clearly, like a team like this, we're going to take a few penalties, and that's where a Sean Couturier comes in. And we kind of knew that, right? I mean, that was a guarantee. And that's when you know that they're more team building than talent building.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an important factor too. Now, I'll tell you this, and this is something that will affect the NHL season cap, everything. If the under-23 team wins this tournament, then that will go a long way to me for the last couple of years saying it's a young man's game, and for a lot of those other older players to not get the kind of contracts when they're looking for that second and third contract, they're not going to be as lucrative anymore, like a LeCavier.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we started the show with, I think the hill to die on in the new CBA is not going to be guaranteed contract. It's going to be that 8-year term. I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
I think the NHL owners are going to say, how about 6 years for the home team, 5 and that's where Fear and Batman would probably go to war on, because the one thing that the players, I mean, they gave up 12-year deals, 13-year deals now for a limit of 7 or 8. Now I think the NHL will try to get it lowered a little bit just to make it more friendly to them, because to that end, it's sort of like, I mean, it's almost like cost certainty. It's like as long as you don't have to give them 8 years,
mm-hmm.
You're talking a wide swath of time here. You're talking about somebody, at 21, they sign an 8-year deal, and then when they come out of it at 29, they're not the same player anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I think rather than continuing on with rosters, because I was on the Donald Fear and Bill Daly call,
yeah,
there's some real interesting things that affect this season and beyond that came out on that call that I think people want to know. So, first off, we all got to see the jerseys, and everybody has an opinion. Team North America looks a little bit like it's from Mad Max.
Okay,
right? Did you not see that, the lettering? And
yes. Let me say, I liked Team Canada's.
Right.
I thought it was pretty good. I thought Team USA's was okay. It was basically, it looked very similar to didn't it look very similar to the Olympic one?
It did.
I thought Team Europe's was an abomination.
Yeah, that's the worst one.
Team Europe's, I heard somebody say it looked like the cover of a Megadeth album.
Yeah.
It was really, it's just not. I get it because there's no, you could have incorporated all the countries that were represented or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just looked weak.
But for all the hot take people out there, when you were seeing, and there are hot take people out there, we know there are, when you were seeing the jerseys without advertising, Daly was quick to say, we've got 199 days. Don't count that as the gospel. You don't know. There could be advertising on there. So we don't know what's going to happen with that yet.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see Joe's Muffler Shop on there. It's gonna be McDonald's, or it's gonna be Ford, and they're gonna, as long as the big companies pony up millions of dollars, and that's what it is. It's like they're waiting for these companies to and it's not, it can't be one. It's not gonna be like Apple is gonna be on all 8 teams.
Right.
No way. I think they're going to try to get like 2 or 3 main sponsors and have the patches all over, and because this is, I mean, okay, you're depending on the competitiveness of the players and the national pride, but it's also a money-making venture for the NHL and the NHLPA. And I think that, that's why I think they'll hold out until the last possible minute to get a bidding war going for advertising on these uniforms.
Yeah, so then there was talk, is this the format that's set in stone? What about 2020? So they basically said, yeah, listen, 2020 is a guarantee, and we're moving forward with this for a while.
Yep.
So I think we could expect this for a while without there even being a question, is this still going to happen?
Well, the interesting thing about that, because coupled with the fact that it was 2020, yes, we're doing it, was we're opening up to a bidding process for the event.
Right.
And I'm like, oh boy, because now we're getting into Olympic territory. Like,
right.
Not to say it's going to be on the billions of dollars like it was for it is for Olympics.
No.
We're talking about a 2-week event, but the thing is, it's almost guaranteed that it will sell out in Toronto, although the ticket prices are a bit steep.
They say it's going well right now, and it's March, so they're still bullish on it.
Yeah, but, and as I said to you yesterday, if New York wanted to make a bid on this, think of it: September, early October, the Yankees and the Mets are in a stretch drive for the playoffs.
Yeah, they're not the right market.
They're not. No, I don't think I don't think there's an American market out there.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no American markets, but
maybe Buffalo.
Maybe Buffalo. Buffalo would be a good one. It's gonna have to be a market that's not relying on 2 baseball teams and maybe even a soccer team, because some will have soccer teams running at that time for competition. It's going to have to be cities that have very little going on,
right?
But still like hockey.
But I think it's realistic that this could be Stockholm, Helsinki.
They never put it. It's funny because when it was being discussed, they never put a tag on it like it has to be North America. So you might be right.
Yeah, I mean, hey, those are hockey markets.
They just wanted to do it. Basically, the message was they wanted to do it this way on the reboot to keep everything simplified so that they had data to look at afterwards, and then they could sort of figure it out. Because, it was also asked, well, what about doing it during this mid-season? And Theo brought it up, and I think it would be like a 17-day break or something.
Right.
And obviously it's not the number one answer, and so that's probably not going to happen. But also Lundqvist brought up a good point yesterday, saying that this is the first time with one of these kinds of tournaments that there's actually going to be a training camp so that there can be some team bonding and you could actually implement systems and go through all that. And so that does go a long way too. So I think this is going to be the way it's going to go and not mid-season. The Olympics were brought up, and there was an interesting answer brought up for the Olympics. I'll give you the quote. Let's see.
Well, while you're looking for that, I can just the one concern for a European World Cup would be, remember, the World Championships are in May. I think they extend to early June, and then you're talking about a tournament in September. It would sort of be stepping on the toes of the World Championship unless you were having it in the same venue, the World Championships in Stockholm and then the World Cup in Stockholm. Or do they?
I'm not sure how
that would work.
That would work. I'll be honest.
Would they skip the World Championships that year because they're doing the World Cup? Because the IIHF is part of it.
I think so. I think they might.
But this year there is a World Championship.
There is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. I'll be honest. All right. So here it is. So Donald Fehr basically came out and said the history is the real discussions take place sometime after the Summer Olympic Games. I don't think there's any difference this time. Now, when you hear that, you say, then why has there been all this discussion, and why has Gary Bettman sort of mentioned it 2 or 3 times? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I think the players have a different opinion on it than the league does.
Yeah. And
the players want to do it. Like Fehr says, listen, you ask a player if they want to represent their country, they want to.
Right.
But he is not going to be committed about it yet because the NHL has been non-committal about it. So we're going to have to wait until, if you're not sick of those NBC Rio de Janeiro Olympic commercials yet, you're going to have to wait all through that until you even know about what's going to happen for the next Winter Olympics.
Yeah, I think this is a complete leverage play by the NHL. I mean, I think this is, what I think this is, they say they're not going to commit until anything after the Summer Olympics. But through all that time, they're going to be negotiating with the IOC, trying to get concessions, trying to get more access, more money, more whatever.
But here's the leverage part. I'm going to give you a quote, and this is the leverage part. The Olympics has its own merits and issues. This is an event that focuses only on hockey. We don't think this event precludes the Olympics. So, they're basically saying, hey, this is all about hockey.
Right.
You got to make the Winter Olympics more about hockey for us.
Right. Right, exactly. Which I think means more, because, okay, the teams really do not benefit.
No.
They're loaning out their players.
I will tell you this. It doesn't benefit the NHL. But I did just do an interview this morning with Hillary Knight, and she said the Sochi Olympics absolutely benefited the sport of women's hockey. Because that's still in growth stage, where the NHL is not really in a growth stage anymore. Now it's just sort of in a stage where you got to pick up some people, but it's not going to get much bigger even after an Olympics. But the women's hockey did get much bigger after the Olympics, and so I think that thought now that the Olympics brings in more viewers, I don't think for the NHL it's really the case anymore. Not regular season.
We have 12 games on the schedule tonight in the NHL. Chicago versus Boston will be a pretty good matchup. Chicago played and beat the Detroit Red Wings last night, which feeds into my theory that Detroit is the team that is most vulnerable, falling out of the 9 that we think are in the race. Calgary versus Buffalo. I'll be rooting for a 3-point game on that one, Russ.
Yeah, shocking.
Edmonton at Philadelphia, you'll get a chance to see McDavid in person in the NHL for the first time.
Yep.
One thing interesting for a team that has so many offensive weapons, what they've been trying to do lately, what Todd McClellan has been trying to do is, they're playing a lot of low-scoring games. I think they're trying to get these guys to buy into the system, to buy into the structure, and it doesn't I know that there was the excitement in Buffalo of the McDavid versus Eichel matchup, and I watched some of it, and there were some good moments, but it wasn't this wide open, creative offensive game.
Especially this time of the year. That's why I would have liked that to be at the beginning of the season,
right,
where you can let it loose a little bit more.
Rangers play the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Now that's an interesting one, because right now as we stand, the Flyers are still 3 points behind the Penguins, so all Flyers fans are rooting for the Rangers tonight.
Yeah, Flyers are rooting for a win over Edmonton, and the Rangers to shut out the Penguins.
Right.
Minnesota, Toronto, a well-rested Minnesota team who beat Colorado, and I believe they're tied for the wild card spot. They come in after the Leafs lose in Washington last night, 3-2. So I think unless Minnesota looks past Toronto, which I can't imagine, they're going to be hungry for the 2 points. And let's see, there was one other real good game, I thought. Well, Florida, Colorado, both teams are sort of battling for positions.
Yeah.
Anaheim, Arizona, San Jose, Vancouver. Yeah, the rest of them are sort of like good team versus bad team. But the races are starting. There are still races for
positioning.
For positioning, and one team in each conference has a realistic chance
of falling
in. But it's basically 7 of the 8 teams are almost locks.
Yeah. The interesting thing for this Ranger game is that Jesper Fast won't be in the lineup, and he's a guy that's sort of a glue guy now. He plays a little PK. He makes things happen offensively. He plays good two-way hockey. We'll see what they can do without him, and of course there's no Nash. And going into Pittsburgh now, this is a different Pittsburgh team. So this is the first time that I will gauge how the Penguins are against like a top team that they could face in the playoffs, let's say in the second round if the Rangers played the Islanders and got past them in the first round. I didn't say that would happen, Dan. I'm saying theoretically.
And one interesting thing about the game last night between Washington and Toronto, Washington was already without Carlson, and he's probably going to be out for most of the month of March, but they get back for a couple weeks before the playoffs start. They were also without Nate Schmidt. Now, who's one of their bottom pairing guys, good skater, and it was a day-to-day thing. But this was the thing when they made that trade to open up cap space for Brooks Lake. Apparently, it was for cap relief next year, but they had an opportunity to go out and maybe get a rental defenseman, and they really didn't add. I mean, they were playing Mike Weber last night, and Mike
Right.
Weber, I think, is a limited player.
He
I mean,
is.
if they have injury problems on their defense, that's the one thing that could really derail the Capitals.
True. I mean, there's no getting around that. I mean, but right now, the Capitals are still the team to beat in the East based on the record.
Yeah.
I know there's people that have prevailing thoughts of one way or the other how they might not do well in the playoffs. It's kind of unfair because it's Trotz's second year. We saw some growth last year. This is a great year for Holtby. Now, if they get bounced in the first round, all that criticism's fair. But if they start to, move forward in the playoffs, then things are on the right track for them, and they are, earning what their regular season record is.
Well, good show, Russ. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Eklund should be back. I think we'll have Ty Anderson. For Russ Cohen, this is Michael Agello. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.